Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sustainapreneur Podcast, episode 17, where we're going to be hearing from Taylor Woods, founder of CO Brew. It's a new company who's driving sustainability in the craft brewing industry. You'll be amazed at how he's doing it, and it just might make you love your beer even more, so stick around. Welcome back to another episode of Sustainapreneur Podcast, where we are bridging the gap between business and sustainability. We want to educate and motivate sustainapreneurs by discussing important topics, debating different perspectives, and by showcasing those of you out there who are doing it right now. I'm your host, Nate Hansen, and we're glad to have you with us. So let's get started. I'd like to thank you for being on the show today. So tell me a little bit about what brought you to come up with CO Brew.
Well, it was a long time coming. So I like beer, as any Montanan does, and I like craft beer. And I just remember some time ago going to Big Sky Brewing, going on a tour there, seeing how beer's actually made. And on each fermenter, which is where all the cool stuff happens, where the yeast turns stuff into beer, seeing a hose in a bucket of water and just bubbling like crazy, just splashing out of the bucket, making a big mess. And asking the brewer, hey, what's going on there? Reply of, oh, that's the CO2 blowoff, because when beer is produced, the yeast converts the sugar into alcohol and CO2, and it's a lot of CO2. So we got to see firsthand all that CO2 being generated and just simply released into the atmosphere, and actually released into somewhat of a confined space. And that's just standard industry practice. I've been to about 50-something or 60-something breweries now. I've only seen one where they don't do that. And the only difference is they don't have a bucket.
Oh, they just shoot it off into the air.
Yep, just let it shoot off. So all of them just let all of this CO2 go out, get into the atmosphere, and do what CO2 does. And then the next part of the tour is we saw this big white tank outside. It's like, hey, what's this tank? What is it for? Like, oh, that's the CO2. Like, okay, tell me more. Oh, that's the CO2 we purchase because we have to use it in our brewing process to carbonate beer, to transfer beer from tank to tank, to fill kegs, clean kegs really, and it's part of the bottling and canning process. So they have all these end-use applications of CO2, and they buy the CO2, even though they're producing all this CO2 and letting it just vent off into the atmosphere. So that was kind of the seed there, and after thinking about it more and more, and it's like, okay, this is dumb.
Yeah.
Because the more I dove into it, it's like, all right, the CO2 you guys do get comes from hundreds of miles away. So basically what's happening is you're purchasing CO2 that's derived from fossil fuels from a long way away. You put it in a truck, which burns fossil fuels to get that CO2 here to be put into a process that generates CO2. And it's just crazy. So that was kind of the light bulb. And it was like, all right, the solution is CO2 recycling. That's the answer. We just got to figure out how to get there. And then that started all the R&D and all that cool stuff, which was really, really fun. We did R&D in two steps. One was making sure the gas, because there is a difference in what's blown off versus what they consume. And it's beverage grade purity. It's all about purity. So what you consume, it has to be clean, can't have odors, any bad stuff in it. So we decided, okay, filter. We got to filter it out. No big deal. And then the next thing that took a while to really nail down on was, okay, so we have all the CO2, it's clean. We got to put it somewhere for them to use because they don't use it exactly when it's produced. So you need some storage buffers. So we said, okay, industry standard is storing it as a liquid. How can we do that? So after a long time of research and looking at all these different options, it's like, all right, we have an idea on how to do it. So then we started the research, and the research part was really fun because when we were figuring out how our filters worked, we bought our own fermentation tank, a big one, like way too big for homebrew. It was a keg of beer at a time. And I was meeting with one of the owners at Lolo Peak, who those guys have sponsored some caving events I do. And I was talking with him. It was Al. Like, Taylor, why don't you just take some of our unfermented beer, put it in your fermenter, and then the gas will be produced. You can clean it and test it. I was like, oh, that's perfect. So we started doing that. So we started getting a keg of free unfermented beer a week. We had it for 6 weeks. So everything worked great. We had all this testing done on it. Everything came back perfect every single time. And our waste product at the end was a keg of beer. And we
good payment.
It was awesome. We went around to, it wasn't just Lolo Peak. We went around to different breweries in town and we're like, hey, this is what we're doing. How can you help? Or you can help us by doing this right now. Because if you're producing 200 barrels of beer or 400 kegs every day, one keg, not a big deal. So like we went to Big Sky. They helped us out. Imagination, Draftworks, and quite a few from Lolo Peak. So we did that. We proved out we can filter the gas in a way that we want to. And then concurrently with that, we were testing our methods to store gas as a liquid, which worked the first time we tried it. And we tried it again and again with different parameters, and it worked great. So with that, we were like, okay, we've got these two things that work now. Next step is to integrate them into one unit. So we went out, we raised some money, and a lot of it was local money, which was great. And with that money, we were able to invest in essentially capital equipment, and we built out our first super manual model that we tested at Lolo Peak. And we would sit there and operate it manually for about 6 hours every single day we were there. It was fun, but you kind of get bored of being around breweries, at least in the back when you're there that much. So all of that worked great. We did obviously have hiccups, but we were able to adjust them, debug stuff very rapidly. I have an amazing team to work with.
How many people do you have on your team?
See, payroll side, there are 3 of us, and then we have another 3 that are kind of in-depth advisors to call on. And the team ranges from, like business side, production, engineering, marketing, tech, all that stuff. So it's pretty well-rounded. And it's just a great group of people. I love working with everybody, so it's awesome. I can't wait to go to work each day. The way I look at it is I get to go to work rather than I have to, which is awesome. I love it. So once we were able to get all those issues solved, then we started to upgrade everything with automated controls. So that way, the head brewer there, Paul, all he would have to do is hook up a hose, push a button, and it would take care of everything else, which it did. So we started doing that, and we took a very incremental technical approach with it just to make sure that we minimize technical risk while trying to maximize technical gains. And in doing so, we were able to generate sufficient CO2 in this kind of beta testing phase to start consuming it. So the first step was using it to clean kegs. Went great. Next step was to use it to transfer beer from its kind of conditioning where it gets carbonated into the kegs. That was cleaned with CO Brew. And a side note is, so what we're doing is we're not saying so much it's recycled CO2, we're rebranding it as its own ingredient because it really is the way it interfaces with the beer.
Yeah.
So what our systems do is they convert those CO2 emissions into CO Brew, which is, as we say, the next generation of sustainable brewing ingredient. It's sourced perfectly locally. It's produced in the same room it's consumed, and it doesn't leave that room. And it is produced in a way that so far is cheaper than the traditional way of procuring it. And it has all these benefits. So sustainability, lower cost, increased worker safety, higher efficiency, all of that good stuff on a really easy to use technology platform. It's tight, highly functional, easy to operate, easy to maintain. So it's just a great fit, and getting all of that in there, it was a real long process of just working with these different brewers, asking them, saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. What do you think? And then not just hearing them, but listening, and then saying, okay, let's try that and see how it works, see if you like it. So then we, at that point, we had kegs of beer that were cleaned with CO Brew, filled using CO Brew, and then the last step was to carbonate beer with CO Brew. So head brewer Paul, he took 15 barrels or 30 kegs worth of their Alpenglow wheat ale, carbonated that up with CO Brew. We had a tasting event right when it was finished carbonating, which was fun. Tasted great. And then a month later, we had our CO Brew Fest, which was the first brew fest that's all about celebrating sustainable brewing. What we do with CO Brew is sustainable carbonation. Because right now, breweries, just the nature of the business, the nature of their customers, and because it's good business, are sustainable. So trying to treat and reuse their wastewater if they can.
So you mean that the consumer or their patrons are more concerned about sustainability, or?
A lot of the time they are, and then the brewers themselves are very concerned about sustainability because the brewing process produces a number of different waste streams. So one of the big ones is after you take all the grain and you turn that into your wort, you have all of this grain left over, which is a high protein, pretty much filler. So the standard is a brewer will offload that to a farmer, cows, pigs, whatever.
Right.
So that's one way they deal with that rather than taking it to a landfill. And for them, it's great business because they can help out a local farmer, giving them this really good feedstocks that's high in protein, and they're able to save money by not having to transport it to a landfill where it's just going to rot, create methane, more greenhouse gases and stuff like that. So there's one big avenue. One of the other ones, which is more difficult and you really only see with large breweries just because of the capital expense, is reusing or treating their wastewater differently. And I'm not, because I haven't seen it very often, I'm not really sure what the procedures are to do so. But that's one of the big things is brewers trying to reuse water because it's heavily water intensive. So you're at Lolo Peak there, 15 barrels batch, 30 kegs. Each keg is 15.5 gallons. So that's coming up on 500 gallons of water per batch. You do 200 batches a year, you're starting to talk about a lot of water, and then you use water to clean stuff, hose things down. So it uses a lot of water. So trying to recoup that is just good practice. And in areas where water is expensive, it makes sense economically.
I've heard one of the things they're doing now from breweries, especially in towns that have a water treatment facility of some kind, that a lot of times the bacteria that comes out of there mixes in with their biome, molecular, whatever, where they're trying to clean the water through introducing different types of bacteria. And then a lot of times breweries help in that process. It can be overloading, but I've heard lots of good things about having a brewery in town can actually help water purification if they work with the water treatment facility. Now, there's always too much bacteria they can put in, if they overproduce.
And it's not, that's the worst part of it, but it's also every time something goes down a drain.
Yeah. And
the average person in America, I think, consumes 100 gallons of water a day. So what's the population? It was 60,000 people?
Yeah, give or take, plus or minus.
So that's 6 million gallons of wastewater a day, 6 million milk jugs. And it's almost all water,
Yeah.
But it's water treatment's super, super interesting. And there's a lot of cool technology you can integrate with it to make it more sustainable, make it more efficient, and make it more natural.
Yeah.
I know one thing, an industry trend is before they discharge into a river, they used to pump chlorine through the discharge stream to kill everything.
Yeah.
Well, now what they use is they use these special UV lights. It doesn't kill the bacteria, but it makes it sterile. So it's completely inert because it can't reproduce.
Mm.
So if bacteria can't reproduce, no problem.
Yeah.
At least as far as I know.
It's better than pumping chlorine into it, yeah.
The chlorine's a nasty, nasty thing because it's in a gas form.
Yeah. Super
toxic. And it's cheaper, more efficient. And then there's these different ways of tertiary wastewater treatment. All kinds of stuff. That's like a whole other series on how you can treat water. But
maybe that's the next thing for CO Brew.
It could be. The thing with water and breweries is their sanitation chemicals, they have a broad spectrum on pH. So trying to balance out the pH on one hand can be difficult. And then you mix in biological elements of that as well as particulates and solids. So you have to have some type of way to deal with all that to have, in the end, I would want potable water, something that they could reuse, which is so many orders of magnitude more complicated than just making something that's safe to discharge into a river stream. And the thing is, especially here, which is where I would probably want to pilot it because I just like doing it that way, water here's cheap. It's so much easier just to buy new fresh water than try to recycle it and spend X amount on equipment or a service or something like that. So
in the Rocky Mountains, it's plentiful.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about it as much.
So we've got some cool stuff that we're looking into. I'll pull Elon Musk, maybe do a teaser next year on Twitter. Cool. But it'll be really cool, and I'm personally excited about it because I get to design and build it and test it all. So that's awesome. So back to the whole brewery and CO2 part. So at that point, at CO Brew Fest, celebrating sustainable brewing, we were able to serve people this Alpenglow wheat ale that, as we call it, it's CO Brewed. So that's
catchy.
I like it. It's CO Brew, CO2, so we have like a cool play on words, and it kind of makes sense. It registers. There's some connections there with science and stuff like that, so it makes sense.
Be something interesting for listeners to ask their breweries. Are you CO Brewed?
And that's the thing is, if you're a beer drinker, especially one of Missoula, because this is like everybody knows what we're up to, and I've met with I think everybody. Now I think about it. If you go in and you start asking them, granted, the bartenders, the frontline workers, they're not going to be as privy to it just because it's much more specific information than, what someone that's not on the brewing side of the building would know. But as it works its way up, if you ask them, I had the CO Brewed beer at Lolo Peak. It was awesome. When can I get it here? You can start doing that because that's one of the things that we're looking at doing is building out that community of people so that they're able to recognize, hey, this beer is more sustainable, it's better for the environment, and that's where we want to put our dollars is in those breweries. So doing that helps do that.
But not only that, you're still saving breweries money.
Exactly, and that was the entire foundation of it. It was like, we can be sustainable, we can make it easy to use, but it has to save money, and it has to save money quickly. So what we do with the brewers, instead of, if you're a brewer and I come in and I say, hey, I have this awesome thing, you're like, sweet, how much is it? Well, the traditional kind of the way you would normally approach something like that, oh, well, if you buy it, it's X number of dollars, and that is a big number. So then you start thinking, okay, ROI, how do I actually access that capital, this, that, and the other thing? And then it becomes challenging. And then what happens is with that model, you just cut out almost all the breweries. So what we did, and this is after learning from the brewers, after talking with them, learning what challenges they face, what problems they have, not just in brewing and sustainability, but kind of like the global effect of their business as a whole. So one of the issues with small craft brewing is capital and undercapitalization. So not having the capital to purchase something like this, and even if they did, they tend to gravitate more towards revenue generating assets. So new fermentation tanks, bright tanks, canning lines, things like that.
And they skip the cost saving stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what we did is we said, okay, we hear you loud and clear. Here's what we're going to do. We call it CO2 as a service. It's a fixed rate lease model. So we build the equipment, we own it. You get to use it for as much as you want to. If you want to use it every single day, awesome. If you want to use it every other day, that's cool too. It's a fixed monthly rate. And within that rate structure, they are provided with all the filters for gas polishing and all that stuff. So we provide them a lot of those consumables, replacement parts, like we have solenoid valves, part of automation. And after time, those just wear out because that's what they do. Things don't last forever, so we provide those too. And the thinking behind that, the underlying principle is for the brewer to add value to their enterprise, to their community, they need to be brewing beer. They shouldn't have to be maintaining this equipment, running around operating it. They shouldn't have to say, okay, it's time for a filter change. Where am I going to get one? Where's this one compatible? How long is shipping going to take? That type of thing. So we wrap all of that in there so they can focus on brewing beer and let us deal with that. So everything's been designed to be a word from a Steve Jobs movie, precognitive. So before they even see it, they know how to use it because we use fittings that every single brewery uses called tri-clamps.
Oh, okay.
I don't have to train them to say this. I just show them, there you go. They already know how to use it.
Wow.
We use single push start. So what that really means is to start recapture from a fermentation tank. You hook up the hose, pipe, whatever you want to call it, using clamps you already know how to use, fittings you already know how to use. You push one button or turn one switch. You're done. Anybody can do it. The system completely takes over through automation. Its controls can shut itself down when the tanks are full, and it tells you that. And it takes care of all of that. So that way the brewer can go back to making beer, go have lunch, go home early, spend time with their family. And then on the maintenance side, it's been designed to have bare minimum maintenance. So like when you have to change these filters out, you can do it in less than 60 seconds. Close 2 isolation valves, quick disconnect fittings, just like on an air compressor. Pop those, old filter out, new filter we provide, put it in, reverse, you're done. And on large systems, there's a bypass valve. So as the brewer, you don't even have to turn the thing off. You can keep going so we can have maximum uptime.
Also, it's almost like it has 2 different systems. One is just specifically for changing out the filters, so there's no stop in production.
Exactly. So, and that's for larger systems.
Yeah.
For brewers that need to have all that throughput. Smaller ones where it's like, okay, 60 seconds isn't a big deal. Or it's fine now, we'll wait till this fermentation is over and then we'll change it. So
does every system kind of have to be customized to each individual brewery?
No. The only thing that's really customized is how many fermentation connections there are, because we can hook up multiple tanks all at one time. So we just need to know what that number is. It's a super basic number. Basically, if you're the brewer, I say, hey, how many do you have running at most during peak production? So we take that, and we'll typically go with that number or that plus 1. So there's a little buffer in there. And then the only other thing that's, I wouldn't even say customized, but that's sized is how much storage they need. Everything else is pretty much standard. We use the same skid designs, the same equipment, not the exact same across the different product lines, but it has the same orientation, same vendor, same code, same metal, same layouts, all of that just to have the most streamlined production, minimal waste, and ease of production so that we can use pull production instead of push so we can keep inventory low. Right. And the other big thing is, say a brewer in Montana knows how to use this thing. They take a job over in, let's pick a state, let's say Maryland. They go to a brewery that has one. They already know how to use the thing. It can be a different unit, but they already know how to use it. They know how to maintain it because everything's the same. And that makes servicing it easy. It's just like, it has to be easy. It has to work. It has to save money.
Well, the brewers I've met a few of the brewers here in town, and they're very much artisans.
It's an art.
Yes. And it's not traditional business. They're not businessmen and women walking around in suits and ties and everything. They're people who have a passion for this. They want to make good beer, just like vintners back in the day, just like someone who paints a painting. They paint it, they put their passion, their love into it, and they hope people get what they're trying to create. And they're excited when people like it. I mean, that's a business, but it's still artisan. So, I can imagine if an artist had to make his own paint, probably wouldn't love painting as much if he had to make the brushes and the paint and make the...
And that goes into just value added. Mm-hmm. If you're an artist or a brewer or a computer programmer or whatever, if that task is what you're good at, that's what you should be doing, because that adds value to whoever the end user may be. So like if a computer programmer is just awesome and they kill it every time they sit down, if you say, hey, you need to build your own computer, or hey, you just need to add these new monitors, them doing something that's outside of that, something they're clearly capable of doing, it's taking away their resource. It's an inefficient use of human capital. And that kind of goes back to our whole thing, is making sure that we add the most value for the brewer. Because a lot of the brewers we deal with, when it comes to maintenance, for pretty much anything in there, it's on them. Brewers are extremely intelligent people. They're chemists, they're biologists, they're artisans, mechanics, engineers. They have all of these different aspects, different traits, different knowledge pools from all these different areas in one person to do all of these things. So they're capable of maintaining stuff, but that's not their job. As a brewer, your job is to brew. So making sure that we can minimize, because you can't fully eliminate really anything. Anything that's mechanical, anything that has metal moving, it's eventually going to wear out, because that's just the way it is. But minimizing that to where it's like, okay, yeah, this filter, it's depleted, it's time to change it. Take a minute, go change it, no big deal. Or the other part of our CO2 as a service model is we come in quarterly or monthly or semi-annually, whatever the appropriate time frame is. We come and inspect things, check the maintenance logs, and we do some of the maintenance. So that way they don't have to. So it's like changing out, looking at seals, looking at things that need to be lubricated. We can handle that. We can do it in a minimal amount of time. And since there's somewhat a wide degree of operating time, you can be like, all right, well, you guys aren't brewing or you're not going to be using it this day. We'll just come in, do this, do that, and then we'll be out and you're ready to rock and roll for 6 more months. We'll see you next year, kind of thing.
And they're saving money versus what they were doing in the past.
Exactly.
So, they're happy to do it.
And we're, right now we have a number of different proposals that we have sent out, ones that are under review. Some brewers they're reviewing stuff, looking over contracts, all that various stages of the sales cycle. I have yet, to my knowledge, given a proposal to a brewery where they're going to spend more money. Every single one they save. And what's really cool with a fixed rate structure is compared to a price per pound or variable pricing structure is as they grow, their savings grow with them. So we've had a couple breweries where year 1, year 2, they're saving between like 1% and 6%. But based on their growth rate, by year 5, they're saving 25%, 30%.
So the bigger they are, the more money they're going to save?
Well, the bigger they grow. So if you go from, because the technology is very, very scalable. So depending on what unit it is, it works in a wide operating range. So like say you could be 1,000 barrel per year brewery and you're growing by 10% a year. By year 5, you're going to be at probably like 1,800, whatever the math comes out to be. Well, that particular system, because our systems are built by 2 parts: a production unit that cleans and liquefies, and then a storage unit which stores the liquefied gas. Well, The production unit doesn't change. It's the exact same thing throughout that production range, 1,000 to 1,800, whatever it would be. All we'd have to do is add more storage. Super easy. So that way, we're able to maintain a really tight cost structure. As more storage is added, it's more capital investment on our end, so there is a price increase, but you still realize overall savings, and those savings still grow, which is really, really cool because pretty much every brewery I've talked to, they're growing. And some of them are growing like crazy. Like, I can't believe the numbers that they've had previously and what they project out.
Yeah.
So being able to do that, it helps on the financial side of everything. And in some areas, we're looking at average savings of 10 to 15%. And since it's a lease, it's immediate savings. So in our month one, going with CO Brew, say you're spending, let's see, what's an easy number, $850 a month with us.
Right.
Well, if you didn't go with us, you would have been spending $1,000 that month. So initially, you're saving $150 that first month. And as you're growing, by year 4, year 5, that savings might have grown to $450, $500 a month since it's fixed rate, which is really cool. It's very adaptable. So if you add another tank, just add another tank connection. Super easy, no big deal.
Yeah.
And it's because the brewing sector, it's fluid. Kind of a pun. It's very fluid in terms of capacity, infrastructure, growth, things like that. So being able to meet that on a technology platform that can do it in near real time is very important. Otherwise, we would be building all kinds of stuff and trying to recycle parts, and it would just be too complicated.
Yeah.
And given the design and stuff like that, it's all that's doable, which is sweet.
What I always try to promote on Sustainapreneur is that sustainable business is not the, you have to spend a bunch of money to be sustainable. We don't care what it costs. You need to be sustainable. That's kind of the, that's a lot of times the sustainability side. The business side says, we don't mind being sustainable, but we'd like it to save money or make money. And really, that's what makes things drive forward, especially in this country, right? And so if you can make sustainability save money or make money, it'll grow on its own. And you don't have to sit there and say, well, you need to just do this. And then people lose money trying to do the sustainable thing. So I have heard about you for a long time. You're a big name in the community, especially the entrepreneurial world. I do a lot of networking and talking to different people. And every time I talk about doing an interview, I keep saying, well, I'm selecting between 10 people. Who's the best person you think? They're like, Taylor Woods. It's the craft brewing industry. Everyone loves it, and everyone loves sustainability. You take the two, you put it together, you get CO Brew.
Pretty much. And craft beer is sexy.
Yes, it is.
It's that, and it's homegrown. So here in Montana, if you look at almost any brewery, they get a lot of their grains, their base malts. And this is what I'm told, so don't quote me exactly on it.
Right.
But what I've been told, what I've heard, is that the grains come from Montana. So you're having locally sourced ingredients. The labor, obviously, is local. The water is local. They pay local taxes, not just on the property, but alcohol excise taxes. And they're developing really craft beer. If you look at any of them, all of them, it's a community type of thing. So instead, it's like the old school 1800 tavern where you want to go meet people, go see your friends, or do whatever. You go to the brewery, you go to the tavern, and that's what it's like. And they're creating a very open environment that's inviting, that's friendly. Tons of these breweries let kids in there, which is great if you have kids, like almost everybody does. So you're able to have that family community element, and it all goes back to just that whole local focus. The only issue has been in one of their ingredients, CO2, hasn't been until now. So we're able to let breweries use what they produce, put it back into the beer, make it sustainable, save money doing it, and they're able to build out their brand saying, hey, we have CO Brewed beer here. And further, what we're going to be doing, I'm super stoked about it, is something that we haven't seen done, is helping those brewers let people know that, hey, this beer is the most sustainable beer you're going to find. Sure, every brewery recycles as much as they can. They all do the thing with the spent grains. But we recycle our CO2. These other guys, they're not doing it yet. So being able to tell consumers, being able to build out almost like a marketing type part to help these breweries build that community out, something that we're looking at doing. We just selected a new logo. And one of the criteria is how good does this logo look on a can and how good does it look on a bottle?
That's a big factor. Marketing is a huge factor, especially today.
It is. There's breweries around where you can buy their beer and they recycle their CO2 because they're huge, or because where their location is, it makes great economic sense, or that's their value. But I mean, these guys are huge. They produce more beer than the state of Montana does, and they do it every quarter. So these guys have the capital to invest in these other technologies. And it's kind of a bummer because before us, a small brewer couldn't. Now they can. And further, these other breweries, if you buy their products, you wouldn't know that as a consumer unless you really dove into it. We want all of our customers, all of our breweries that CO Brew their beer, we want everyone that drinks their beer to know. So if you're looking at a bottle or a can, see that little recycling logo? There's going to be a CO Brew logo next to it. So that way you know just with a quick glance that this beer is sustainably carbonated, it's CO Brewed. And one of the things we like to say is CO2 recovery is CO Brew. It's what we do. And people should really know about it because they want to know about it. They want to put their dollars where their values are. Because there's salmon safe beer, which when I was in Portland, I saw super cool. That involves like wastewater, like much more in depth than I thought.
Do they have a stamp too?
They have a logo. I don't recall seeing it on beers, but I might not have been seeing beers that have that because there's just beer everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, and I couldn't remember which ones that did and which ones that didn't. But putting our stamp of approval, our CO Brewed beer on it is going to be something that helps these brewers say, hey, we're different.
Yeah.
And you can see why. And we can tell you all about it. We're happy to. And doing that builds out their brand so they can increase their sustainability, increase their customer loyalty, really interact with customers on a more in-depth level. So like if you can go into a brewer and say, hey, I heard you guys are doing this, I would love to know more. And that's something in craft brewing that's really cool is it's really open. So you're able to do that and they'll be like, oh, yeah, well, I can tell you this much, but if you want to talk to our brewer, we can get you hooked up with the brewer and they'll tell you all you want to know. So being able to do that and help people get that going, and that's kind of the other brand part of CO Brew is getting that conversation started, getting people thinking like, oh, I can get this really sustainable beer and it's not going to cost me more. Well, the way that they price their beer, I have no control over.
Right.
But what I can tell you is utilizing CO Brew does not increase their costs. As far as I know, I haven't seen a case where it does. But it just makes sense to let people know that, hey, this is super cool. And if you're the brewer, why wouldn't you want people to know you're doing that? Because it is cool. Because beer is really cool. It's being an artist without knowing how to paint.
Yeah.
Or how to draw. Because I can't draw or paint. I can't make beer either. We can make compelling technology. To me, the tech, there's artistic parts to it. So right now we have very functional technology. But what we're going to be doing is making it very aesthetically pleasing technology, something that's sleek, something that reminds you of a MacBook, something that reminds you of a Tesla, just beautiful lines, something that fits and is perfectly functional. So not only does it work great, but it looks good while it's working.
So like CO Brew 3.0?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Until we get there. And what's cool is with all these brewers, we can just working with them, we learn all these different things and they tell us what they want, and we can implement it. So we can add a degree of customization while keeping the same base components as the core technology. So if they want something that's a little longer, a little taller, maybe they want something oriented a little differently, if it would help them out, we can look into that. But right now, based on what we have, is it's extremely functional and it's very easy for them to use because they've helped us design it. And that's what we're going to continue doing, because at the end of the day, they're the ones using it. I'm not. I'll build them, I'll ship them, I'll install them. It's fun. Go hang out in a brewery all day. But at the end of the day, they're the ones connecting stuff, pushing buttons, turning regulator dials. They're doing all of that. So it needs to work for them. And it needs to be, like I said earlier, basically precognitive, to where they don't need to have a manual. They should just be able to look at it, or have me tell them, you do this here, you do that there, you do that there. Sweet, I'm going to have lunch. You got it. Because they're very smart people. And might as well just make it as easy as we can, because there's no reason to make something complicated. It doesn't have to be.
That's pretty much the premise of what we really try to push, is that sustainability isn't just good for the world. It makes good business sense now. With the dawning of the age of technology and smartphones and the internet, we're connected so well that it's gone from customers care about cost, quality, and aesthetically pleasing, to now the new differentiator business is sustainability. What are you doing for my community? What are you doing beyond just giving me a product? There's lots of brewers out there, and they're all making good beer. They all love what they do, and the people in their local community really want to see, they could be people that are driving the biggest vehicles. They could be shopping in all the box stores. But when they show up in a brewery, they want to know if it's locally sourced. It's a hub for sustainability as far as I'm concerned, because, it's from some of the numbers that I was looking up, it said that of all the breweries in America, craft brewers make about 17% of the beer, but they employ 65% of the people. And so really, when you go to these craft breweries, you're putting money not only back into your community, but back into people of the United States, putting it back into farming, putting it back into production and manufacturing and things like that. And that's what a lot of these brewers care about. It's a huge differentiator, a huge way to separate yourself in the brewing industry, where I'm making good beer, but I'm also giving back to your community, giving back here, doing this, doing that, doing all these great things. It's a way to not just make good beer, but to really elevate yourself in prominence, right? So that's what we try to promote. That's what we try to get our listeners to understand, is that it's not just the hippie model anymore. It is, look, this makes good business sense, and you can feel good doing it, right? So look at Patagonia. Look at all the great things they've done. They charge a little bit more for their stuff, but people are willing to pay for it, but because they trust the brand. There can be a lot learned from that kind of business model, and I see it being big in the brewing industry. So you're going down the right track, I think. I want to thank you for being on the show. It was really cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah. All right. So that's the end of our show today. I'd like to ask you to come back, check out some of the new podcasts, some of the old podcasts, and we'll see you next week. Take care, guys. Bye.
That concludes our episode for today. As always, thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like, share, rate, and subscribe. And we'll see you all again next time on Sustainapreneur Podcast, where we are bridging the gap between business and sustainability.